Topping tonight's prime news, the CCP is in the USA. The Chinese government has far-reaching tentacles inside the homeland. No need for a Chinese spy balloon to traverse American skies. The communist country gets plenty of intel right from their people on American soil. The weaker the Biden administration's stance on China is, the more emboldened Xi Jinping is to tighten his grip. Today, the Department of Justice announced the arrest of two men on allegations they operated a secret police station in the middle of New York City on behalf of China.
China's national police force, which is called the Ministry of Public Security, or the MPS. The MPS has repeatedly and flagrantly violated our nation's sovereignty, including by opening and operating a police station in the middle of New York City. These defendants did China's bidding in secret while acting under the direction and control of an MPS official in China.
The secret police station was utilized for everything from helping Chinese citizens renew their driver's license to more sinister acts like using U.S. citizens to track Chinese dissidents and intimidate them. The two Chinese nationals arrested in Chinatown destroyed evidence of their communications with the CCP before being discovered by the FBI, likely in an attempt to hide the full extent of what they were up to with the Chinese Communist Party. The DOJ also announced charges against 34 of China's Ministry of Public Scrutiny officers for belonging to a task force that used fake social media accounts to target Chinese democracy activists outside of China and also spread pro-China propaganda on U.S. technology platforms. This authoritarian regime is operating these illegal overseas police stations in more than 50 sovereign nations right now, more than 100 government-backed locations globally, a blatant violation of international law. And it proves yet again that the CCP has no fear or respect for Joe Biden. Because of his cozy relationship with one of our greatest adversaries, the U.S. is facing our biggest geopolitical crisis in decades. He is allowing this authoritarian regime to overtake the U.S. as the world's leading superpower. And our enemies and even our allies are turning to China instead of us. If communist Chinese spies can secretly operate an entire police station in the heart of New York City, then how can we trust the U.S. government really knows how extensive the CCP's influence is on America? The answer is we can't, and China knows this, which is why Xi Jinping will continue to take advantage of us every day Joe Biden is in office until our nation's power is so deteriorated we no longer pose any threat to our enemies. To discuss this threat, I'd like to welcome a congressman from the House Select Committee on the strategic competition between the U.S. and CCP, Florida Congressman Neal Dunn. Congressman, welcome.
Thank you so much, Jen. Always a pleasure to be on.
Glad to have you here tonight, sir. This is something that your Select Committee has called out. How vast do you and your colleagues believe is the CCP influence here in the U.S.?
Well, it's actually it's huge is the answer. You know, we think we've discovered two, perhaps three of these police stations in our country. But let's be honest, there are probably many more than that. The fact that we just made two additional arrests yesterday on top of all the arrests last year from the secret police station closed down in Manhattan late last year, which Chairman Gallagher and I visited. It's just the tip of the iceberg. We really need to drill a lot deeper into this, and it's in many, many parts of our society.
It's very concerning, and this news of these arrests really comes at the same time that we're watching in real time a rise of Chinese nationals crossing our wide-open border, entering the United States. And just to give people some idea of the numbers here, since the beginning of 2023, we've seen at least 4,300 Chinese undocumented migrants apprehended crossing our border. That amounts to more than double for all of the previous year. And not to go ignore it, I mean, many of these migrants, Congressman, are military-aged men. I mean, Chinese nationals, they're granted asylum at a relatively high rate here in the U.S., 58%. I mean, this, along with knowing that Xi Jinping is invading our sovereignty, why is Joe Biden ignoring this?
So you're right. You're exactly right. We have no idea who's coming in as Chinese. I mean, are they people who are looking for asylum, or are they, in fact, agents of these Chinese police stations? And we don't do anything to check that. We don't know who that is. We don't know any of them. We clearly have to work to expose that. There's just an awful lot of leakage around the sides of this issue that we haven't begun to get a handle on. And our universities are a great place to start.
Yeah, and it's certainly starting to feel like an invasion. You look at those pictures there as people just making their way to our border, especially with Title 42 expiring in just a matter of weeks now. And then meantime, you've got the ongoing push to ban Chinese-owned TickTock in the United States. You've got a coalition of 17 Republicans in Congress urging the Rules Committee to block members of Congress from using TickTock due to security threats. Meantime, the state of Montana, they're taking some strong moves here, approving a first-of-its-kind bill that would ban TickTock for Montana citizens, making it even illegal to download the app. Now that awaits the governor's signature there. Congressman, what's your take on TikTok? I mean, what should the U.S. be doing about, another Chinese hold over us?
So we clearly know TikTok is a malign influence, and we would like to get it off as many platforms as we possibly can in this country. For instance, anything that's government-run, anything that's government-owned, whether federal or state government, or, by the way, if you're running a university, you could get it off those systems. However, banning it, we have to be careful the way we do it, because Newsmax has some experience in this. We don't want to see the Biden administration empowered to simply ban any social media app that they don't like, because we know that they might ban Newsmax next. So I think that we have to understand the constitutionality of how we ban it, but we certainly can get TikTok off of all of the federal, all of the state, and by the way, any private enterprise, any private network that wishes to remove it can and should remove it, and do so in a timely fashion. We're going to work on the constitutionality of this issue in such a way that people's free speech is protected. At the same time, we can agree, and I think everybody does on the committee on both sides of the aisle, TikTok is bad.
Yeah, and I know one of your Republican colleagues compared it to, having a spy balloon in your hand there at all times with all the information they can gather on us. Congressman Neal Dunn of the great state of Florida, always a pleasure to see you. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks so much, Jen. You have a great evening.
You too. And to continue the conversation, I'd like to bring in former Deputy National Security Advisor for VP Dick Cheney and Chair of the America First Policy Institute's China Policy Initiative, Stephen Yates. Stephen, welcome. Thanks for joining us tonight.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So let me ask you this first and foremost. How did the U.S. allow Chinese surveillance like what we saw in New York City? I mean, how could a police state in our own country in the Big Apple go undetected?
Well, it's a great question. Part of the answer is that Americans, by and large, are very open and welcoming, and we want to be tolerant and respectful of other cultures. But one of the biggest barriers in all of this has frankly been language. Every Chinese person of any meaningful age at some point is going to be studying English, whether they become fluent or not. And I'd say less than 1% of Americans, probably less than 0.1% of Americans, before they get out of high school will have studied any Chinese. And so in some ways, this is a closed community that a lot of people don't know what's going on. We frankly haven't listened closely enough to those that are dissidents and those that have been oppressed by the Chinese Communist Party, because they would very immediately be able to point us to troublesome actors and troublesome organizations. And I think that's what's happening. When they start going after dissidents, harassing people in our country and many others, as long as they feel like there's a safe and cooperative place to talk, we'll be able to find where more of these are. But we just have not really made the effort in recent U.S. administrations on policy.
I mean, yeah, there's an estimated 100 Chinese police stations operating globally, and it's against international laws. I mean, the DOJ can shut them down, like in New York's Chinatown. But what is stopping China from just having new ones pop up?
Well, of course they can, and sometimes they masquerade as other organizations. I mean, they'll be some kind of a benevolent or charitable organization trying to provide relief or whatever else. But in the midst of all, this is what the Communist Party does. They embed into every kind of organization. Just like private companies that want to do business in China have to have a cell of the Chinese Communist Party. If you're ethnically Chinese, you're actually racially profiled by the Chinese Communist Party. And they approach you trying to remind you that you need to be more loyal to the motherland than you are to the country in which you're a citizen. I mean, it's the height of racism and its manipulation. We've allowed it for far too long, and we really need more voices in the United States speaking up against it, because a lot of people who are ethnically Chinese are taken advantage of, frankly, by the Chinese Communist Party in this way. We should stand with them.
Yeah. It's a great point. And, as we were discussing just a moment ago, you've got Chinese nationals crossing our border right now at an unprecedented rate, thousands coming through the Darien Gap. Many of them are military-aged men. How much of a threat could that pose to us?
Well, it's mind-boggling in two respects. Number one, I don't know of anybody who makes a plan to go from China to the United States by way of Latin America. It could happen, probably some numbers, but this is a very unusual and different recent trend. Second, there's also a lot of concern in my family and many other communities around this country about fentanyl and other things that get smuggled by mules. And we know that organized crime uses innocent people to try to bring material across also. So there's a question of who are these people, but also what are they packing and how are we really even checking? There's two major vulnerabilities that are crushing American communities, not just at the border, but in other parts of the country. And once again, our government is doing almost nothing to try to address it.
Yeah, they see a weak leader in Joe Biden, and we see the surveillance ramping up, and obviously these concerns about who's coming into our country right now. Stephen Yates, glad to have you here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much.